everyone. My name is Sarah Vitale, and I am the chair of Muncie Resists, an indivisible activist organization in Delaware County, Indiana. I am here with Phil Boltz, communications chair for Muncie Resists, and Drs. Kristen Cipollone, associate professor of elementary education, and Dr. Gilbert Park, associate professor of social foundations and multicultural education, both at Ball State University. Unfortunately, Dr. Emily Rutter, our other presenter, is unable to attend tonight. She suffered a loss of a friend. A friend of hers passed away this evening. Our thoughts are with Emily and her friend's spouse and family. This is the second event in a series on disinformation. Our first event, which featured guests Dr. Kristen McAuliffe and Kate Elliott, focused on defining and discussing ways to combat disinformation more generally. You can watch that event on our Facebook page. Tonight's event focuses on a specific type of disinformation surrounding the discussion of race in K through 12 schools. So you might have heard about the Purple for Parents movement. It began in Arizona in 2018 as a response to the pro-teacher #RedForEd movement, which focused on increasing teacher pay, peeling back harmful standardized testing, and improving public education. As a counter movement, Purple for Parents was started by members of a private Facebook group of the Arizona Patriot Movement, a group identified as an extremist right-wing organization by the Southern Poverty Law Center. In 2019, a chapter of Purple for Parents started in Indiana, as Indiana's teachers were organizing around the Red for Ed mantle. While the group initially focused on combating the Red for Ed movement, which it called communist among other things, it turned its attention to critical race theory and social emotional learning in around 2020, after former President Donald Trump called for federal agencies to stop trainings on white privilege and critical race theory. Trump has said that critical race theory borders on psychological abuse and is, quote, divisive, un-American propaganda. Recently, the activities of Purple for Parents movement have hit pretty close to home. There are several organizations in Hamilton County and around the state. And on September 11th, the Muncie 912 Tea Party and Citizens for Good Government hosted a day-long education summit at Glad Tidings Church here in Muncie. Rhonda Miller, president of Purple for Parents Indiana, spoke about critical race theory, the 1619 movement, social emotional learning, and the LGBTQI community. She and others encouraged Muncie residents to attend school board meetings, which many promised to do. In fact, many school boards are preparing for and seeing disruptive, combative, often non-parent groups targeting and sabotaging public discussion of these issues.
So, hi, my name is Phil Boltz. I'm the communications chair for Muncie Resists. So education in America is not a newly contentious subject. Our schools are a space where students learn and grow, but our schools are also a space where philosophical and political ideas are defined, negotiated, and changed over time. It's not surprising that such a process becomes politically charged. Our broader society is also changing. With a short public memory, it's possible for established practices to seem strange, unknown, or dangerous despite historic precedent. Similarly, we often assume that what is familiar to us is commonplace throughout the country. The public school system in America is a big institution. The sheer size of it makes it difficult for it to be radical or extremist. Public institutions are also not inclined to engage extremist issues. When groups frame historically established precedent, like social emotional learning or conversations about race in schools, as extreme, they shift the Overton window, which is the term used for the range of policies politically acceptable to the mainstream population at a given time. Schools are then pressured to engage in what now seem to be partisan conversations and defend their curricula or to acquiesce to the demands placed upon them. This is what is happening with the attack on critical race theory and social emotional learning. Purple for Parents, the Tea Party, and similar movements were designed in response to supposed extreme incursion of socialist forces within our country. But the targets of their invective are middle American fixtures, public schools, labor unions, democratic relations. In order to cajole their opponents in the media and themselves further away from a democratic society, they aggressively justify their positions along the same lines as extremists throughout American history. The event tonight is being facilitated by Muncie Resists, a partisan, politically focused organization. And this is in large part because now that the groups like Purple for Parents have politicized critical race theory and the like, civic and public educational institutions shy away from handling the topic. But this need not be an overly partisan issue. Our Midwestern values call us to value all people in our community equally. Discussing how to bring about equality, equity, opportunity, and outcome is a conversation at many dinner tables and bar tops. Attempting to eradicate this open discussion and instruction within our schools is an effort to obscure, minimize, and curtail our capacity as a diverse community. And so in response, Muncie Resists is including educational disinformation as part of our Disinformation in Our Community series. Tonight, we'll hear a panel of two education scholars. Their positions are well-founded, established, and available to you this evening. Their critical insights will hopefully weave together school practices, philosophical reasoning, and public discussion of the topics at hand. So with that, we will have our panel.
All right,
Sarah?
I want to invite all of you attending to put any questions as they come up to you in the chat. And after we have our panel discussion, we'll have time for questions at the end around 8. We plan to go till about 8:15, so to give you a little sense of the agenda. All right, so we've been hearing a lot about critical race theory recently. Gilbert, could you define it for us? Oops, you're muted. Sorry, Gilbert. This is
okay.
The life in
better.
Zoom.
So I try to say something, I'm just muted. So critical race theory means a lot to different people, but there seems to be a common theme where people use this thing called critical race theory as an analytical framework to bring race to the forefront of analysis to make differences. And then in the process, what it does is that it highlights unequal structure that we have that marginalize those of us who are less than fortunate for different reasons. So its goal is not about bringing about a sense of guilt or point to individual as you're the problem. Instead, the system, the focus has always been the system, as it started with the lawyers during the civil rights movement, and way before that as well too. Their assumption was that law is not created, nor was it applied fairly to all individuals. And from that assumption, they were able to critique the system that unfairly treats people of color. And that has evolved into, without a name, it's been used as a tool. In the late 80s, there was a conference in Madison, Wisconsin, when a bunch of lawyers got together and decided to call it critical race theory. When that happened, it has transferred or spread to different fields. In the field of education, critical race theory has been a very useful tool to analyze the effects of race in our schools that comes in the way of providing equal educational opportunity. And then there are 6 basic characteristics that Delgado identified to be. One is that it comes from the assumption that racism is an ordinary, everyday experience of people of color. And it also argues that we have the system of white over color notion, and that is not just there, is that it has specific purpose, where it serves the racism as we have it, advances the interest of both white elites by giving them material gains, and for white working class people, give them psychological benefits of their sense of superiority. And then 3, this critical race theory holds that race and races are not something biological. Instead, these are products of social thoughts and relations that has direct consequences, that these are created for specific reasons. And that the critical race theory recognizes different racialization and its many consequences. That just because if you're one skin color, not that we all experience same racism, yet it comes in many different forms with many different consequences that ultimately benefits the system that favors white people. And then the third is that it works against this essentialism by looking at the intersectionality and anti-essentialism. It recognizes that no person has a single or one easily stated unitary identity, yet they got multiple identities and they work together. Where it presents a possibility that within the marginalized population, there could be other isms to marginalize one another. And the last is that what CRT is mostly concerned with is to not only to highlight the systematic inequality, systematic problems, but most importantly, give the voice to the unique voice to people of color whose voice has been largely ignored. And that's how I understand critical race theory to be.
That is a really fantastic definition. When I first saw this conversation about critical race theory in the schools happening, I thought, well, I teach a unit on critical race theory, and I'm teaching about Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw, these people in the 70s and 80s, talking about how, well, the law might be de jure not racist, but in a de facto way, the way it's applied is racist. But these are complicated legal texts. And so I thought, well, they're not doing those in K through 12 building, but you have the more capacious definition that you offered, I think is really helpful, because we can see how critical race theory is a lens to think about structural racism in general. So thank you